Hello Raptors fans, and welcome back to Raptors Report. Today we will be discussing the Toronto Raptors victory over the New Orleans Pelicans. But before we do that, we've got to talk about the Toronto Raptors defense. The Toronto Raptors defense has been getting it done. They've won 6 of their past 7 games, and a ton of that is due to the Toronto Raptors having some of the best defense in the NBA. And we're going to take a look at the stats, break down what is going on, why the Toronto Raptors are faring so well on that end of the court. So first of all, let's take a look. I'm going to do a 5-game sample size so that we're not simply doing a Texas sharpshooter here where you draw a line around where the Toronto Raptors started to be successful and only count that. I'm just going to do the past 5 and let you guys see what the results are. So here are some stats. First of all, the Raptors over the past 5 games is that the Raptors have the number 2 defensive rating in the NBA of 105.5, second only to Portland, which is far better than the league average offensive rating, which is 113.5. And obviously, offensive and defensive rating are the same when it's the whole league because it's, an average of all the teams. So that's almost 10 points per 100 possessions better than the league average, which is impressive. The second point here is that the Raptors are number 6 in opponent estimated field goal percentage. EFG accounts for 3-point shots when calculating of 50.9, and the league average's EFG is 54% this season. The third thing is that the Raptors are number 3 in preventing offensive rebounds, so they're collecting defensive rebounds very well. Opponents are only securing 26% of available offensive rebounds, which is 3rd in the league over that time span. And the last one, we're kind of looking at the 4 factors here when it comes to defense. The Raptors are number 10 in creating turnovers at 15%, which is pretty impressive. The only negative thing, and it's not really a surprise when you watch the games, is that over that time span, the Toronto Raptors are sending their opponents to the line a lot. 34% opponent free throw rate, which is not that bad when you consider that the Toronto Raptors are also one of the best teams in the league at drawing fouls. So they commit a lot of fouls and then they draw a lot of fouls. They're number 6 over that time span in drawing fouls. So it's not as if there's a huge deficit there. It's just that there are so many fouls called during the games with the Toronto Raptors. So that kind of paints a picture. The Toronto Raptors are disruptive. They are stingy with the rebounds, and they are contesting a lot of shots, making it difficult for their opponents to score. And when you're able to do that, you're going to be a good defensive ball club. And they really have been. I think that probably the most impressive stat there is the preventing the offensive rebounds, the number 3 in the league. They've done a really good job in that regard. That's really contributed to the fact that they have the number 2 defense over the past 5 games. There are some other reasons as well. Number 1, veterans are playing more minutes, and a lot of success on the defensive end, especially in the NBA, comes down to veterans being able to play the role well, doing what it takes to execute the defensive game plan. 2 of the veterans who've been playing more minutes are Davion Mitchell, who has been excellent defensively since Emmanuel quickly went down with injury. He has started all of the games for the Toronto Raptors over this time period, and his defense, especially at the point of attack, has been critical to the Toronto Raptors being able to defeat teams and being able to get players under control and stop teams from being able to get into their sets easily. Another veteran who has gotten healthy for the Toronto Raptors and has played a very big role off of the bench and eating minutes and playing tough defense, getting in the passing lanes, all of that kind of stuff, is Bruce Brown. Bruce Brown has really emerged and shown that last season was a bit of a fluke. He's gotten healthy, and now he's able to contribute. So having those 2 players play more minutes has been very important for the Toronto Raptors, fielding a competent defense. Another thing is that there is some strength of schedule here. First of all, the Toronto Raptors played Atlanta twice, and they played them in their building, so that's important. Not to discount the fact that the Raptors were able to win away against the Hawks twice, which is impressive. However, they were missing one of their best offensive players for the majority of those 2 games, that player being Jalen Johnson, who left the game in the first meeting He suffered an injury during that game and was missing in the second game. He's been missing since, but he was not available for most of those 2 games, and he is probably, after Trae Young, their second best offensive player, and he was missing for them. So that is one reason they've been able to play good defense. They also played the Pelicans. The Pelicans have Zion Williamson. They have not been a very competent offensive team this season. Well, the problem is that they can't really shoot the ball, and they kind of struggle to score outside of Zion Williamson. So that's another team that if you played them every night, you're going to look like a competent basketball club. And then obviously Orlando, the other team, so twice against Atlanta, once against the Pelicans, once against Orlando, and Orlando did not have Jalen Suggs or Franz Wagner during those games, and they win on the defensive end. That's kind of how they are able to defeat other teams, is that they're not a powerhouse club on the offensive side, even when they're fully healthy. And when they're missing 2 of their best players, they're going to look pretty miserable on offense. So there is definitely some strength of schedule going on there with the Toronto Raptors winning a bunch of these games. Obviously, I've left out 2 of the Toronto Raptors' better victories, where they beat the Boston Celtics. That was a very, no doubt about it, impressive victory against one of the best offensive clubs in the NBA. And then they played against the Warriors, who have had an up and down season. They've looked actually kind of miserable, so it's not as if that's some, feather in their cap that they were able to beat them. I'll just go into why I'm not including those 2 games. There's a phenomenon, it's called Texas sharpshooting. And what it is that if, let's say you're imagining a hillbilly with a gun, and he's firing shots at his barn. And what he does is that after he shoots a bunch of holes in his barn, he goes over to the barn and he draws a circle around the shots that he fired into the side of his barn. And said, look, I'm dead center. The idea being that the post-facto analysis, when you go back and you re-examine things, you have to be objective when you're deciding what games to include and what games to exclude. So if I went up to only the past 7 games and then excluded the prior 3 where the Toronto Raptors lost big, that would be kind of just skewing the stats intentionally to paint the Raptors in a good light. And I didn't want to do that. We could have done these stats using the past 10. I chose the past 5. So that kind of explains things. Another reason that the Toronto Raptors have been a little bit better, and I hate to say this, but Grady Dick has played less. And Grady Dick started off the season moving his feet, playing decent defense. I think he's hit the sophomore slump, and it has been super difficult for him to recover when he's going around screens. And it's been happening a lot recently. He's been playing around 30 minutes a game this season. Over the past 5, that number has gone down to below 25. And really, I think maybe it's not necessarily that they're trying to play him less. It's just that Darko has more options now. Bruce Brown is a guy that is certainly one of the reasons that he is not playing as many minutes. They play the same position. Bruce Brown is simply, at this stage in his career, just a much better defender. If you're the coach and you're trying to win games, we've lost a lot of games here. I get to choose the lineups. I'm going to put this guy, this veteran here, Bruce Brown, in the game, and he's going to help me win some games. And that's really kind of what's happening. And last but not least, we got to talk about Scottie Barnes. Scottie Barnes has really taken his game defensively to the next level. He didn't have the best defensive night last night, but it was against one of the premier interior scorers in the NBA, Zion Williamson. Zion Williamson is a force, and he kind of blew past Scottie Barnes a bunch of times last night. And I'm not going to say that Scottie Barnes had a wonderful defensive evening, but if we look at the other games that he's had over the stretch where the Toronto Raptors have been winning, he has been magnificent defensively. So one kind of subpar night isn't going to color my expectations and my vision too much when I'm looking at the bigger sample size, the grander scheme of things, where I'm seeing that he has taken a step and become just a very, very good defender. And of course, there's other reasons as well. Jakob Poeltl has been a lot better recently, and the whole team has looked more on a string. Even RJ Barrett has been competent defensively. He's had more good defensive moments than bad, I would say. So everybody is starting to come along, and the rising tide has floated almost all of the boats on the Toronto Raptors. So that's a quick breakdown on what I've seen from the Toronto Raptors in terms of their defense. I think that they are looking very competent on the defensive end, scarily competent. And I think that's a pretty good segue to get into the Toronto Raptors victory against the New Orleans Pelicans, who they were able to defeat last night in a convincing manner. Why don't we get into the player evaluations? Because there were a lot of really good standout performances in this game. And I think the best player of the game, there's no doubt in my mind who it was. Jakob Poeltl was, I think, pretty clearly the Toronto Raptors' best player last night. He had 21 points on 14 shots. He was 1 of 2 from the free throw line, 14 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 blocks, only 1 turnover, and was excellent defensively. Very, very good defensively. He does a great job of rotating onto the perimeter. I think that is one of his best skills as a big man, is his ability to move his feet on the perimeter and stay in front of guards on switches. He did that multiple times last night, and then at the rim, he was providing a lot of great help defense. He had a very nice block on Trey Murphy. The Raptors did a good job funneling Trey Murphy into the help defense, and then Jakob Poeltl cleaned up the mess with a very nice block. In terms of the rebounding, making sure it was one and done, making sure that other players weren't scoring, I think Jakob Poeltl just did a very good job. And then on the offensive end, the Pelicans are a small team. Jakob Poeltl was simply getting into the open spots in the defense and scoring around the rim. They would bring a hard double to Scotty Barnes, and Scotty Barnes would find Jakob Poeltl. Jakob Poeltl and RJ Barrett were hooking up all night long. They were finding each other with really accurate passes. RJ was doing a very good job of setting up Jakob Poeltl around the basket, and Jakob Poeltl returned the favor with a couple of assists as well. I think it was just a great performance from Jakob Poeltl, probably one of his best games of the season. Next up, we'll go to Scotty Barnes. I think there was a pretty big drop-off between Jakob Poeltl and the other starters. I think Jakob Poeltl had a very good game, hard to find any flaws. Scotty Barnes had a good game, I'm going to say. Even though he did have a couple of things that did not go very well for him. So let's read off the stat line. 21 points on 21 shots, so not the most efficient. 1 of 7 from 3, so another one of those nights where his shot selection had a lot to be desired. He was 8 of 9 from the free throw line, so that's a positive development. When he wasn't jacking up shots, he was getting inside and drawing fouls against a smaller team. He had 11 rebounds, great, 8 assists, 3 steals, a block, and only 1 turnover. So very positive from a playmaking standpoint. You love to see that 8 assists and only 1 turnover. He is just a very good player at finding people on the floor in their spots. You know, we're getting spoiled here. We're watching a player who is able to run an offense. And a lot of the time, he doesn't just do that when he's face up to the basket. He can do it when he's in the post. Just a very aware player who's able to understand what the coverages are going to be, where his teammates are on the floor. Just a lot of very impressive passing. And as we mentioned, the rebounding. One of the most impressive things about the Toronto Raptors is limiting other teams' offensive rebounds. So Jakob Poeltl is a big part of that. Scotty Barnes also a very big part of that. 8 defensive rebounds, impressive. And the unfortunate part here was the efficiency. So he was jacking up too many threes, 1 of 7 from 3. That's one of those nights where he could have changed his approach a little bit more. I understand that Zion Williamson actually did a really good job protecting the basket yesterday, and he had a couple of blocked shots, a couple on Scotty Barnes, in fact. And so I think Scotty Barnes was seeing what the defense was doing, which was kind of loading up in the paint and he was trying to shoot. But then again, they did not have great rim protection. So they were packing the paint. They were doing a lot of zone defense, and obviously shooting is going to be able to break that. And they were able to beat the zone with the pass a couple of times. And I think that Scotty Barnes perhaps could have tried to go inside a little bit more, maybe play off the ball a little bit more and become a play finisher rather than a guy who's trying to initiate the offense, especially if that's only going to come from 3-point shots. Overall, I just think a good game. And although he wasn't able to limit Zion Williamson, who was kind of blowing past him, I think he did some other good things defensively and helped the Raptors. It was definitely a team effort where they were able to shut down the Pelicans outside of Zion Williamson, and Scotty Barnes was a part of that. Next, we'll go to RJ Barrett. RJ Barrett did not have a very efficient night, so he had 17 points on 19 shots. He was 1 of 4 from 3. He was 0 of 3 from the free throw line, so that's a little concerning considering that he has had some problems there. 6 rebounds, 6 assists, 0 steals, 0 blocks, 1 turnover, so he was doing a good job playmaking. He had a difficult time scoring on Trey Murphy. Trey Murphy was doing a very good job moving his feet. He had a couple of blocked shots on RJ Barrett. Yeah, the kind of wings and forwards of the Pelicans made it pretty difficult for Scottie Barnes and RJ Barrett to score. But thankfully, RJ Barrett and Scottie Barnes both did a really good job of finding their teammates in a position to score. And RJ, with a lot of defensive attention on him, was able to find his teammates. Again, like Scottie Barnes had 8 assists to 1 turnover, very good. Same with RJ Barrett, 6 assists, only 1 turnover. So limiting the damage there, and although they weren't very efficient scorers, I think that they were positive contributors on offense because both of them have good vision. Both of them are going to make good plays, especially with Jakob Poeltl cooking 10 to 14. Jakob Poeltl, those guys were finding him. Those guys were making plays for him in the paint where he could finish. And that's how you punish a team if they're bringing 2 to the ball, if you're having trouble scoring, if the matchup isn't great for you. If you're able to find your teammates who are wide open, you've done your job. Don't worry too much about being able to score. If you're able to play make and your teammates are scoring efficiently, that can be a win for you on offense as well. And on defense, I honestly thought he had a pretty good night. I've harped on him a little bit in terms of his help defense, but he had a couple of good help defense moments last night where he was able to, it wasn't counted as a block, but he was able to rotate into the paint. He was able to jump straight up and it created a missed shot. It looked like a block, but he wasn't credited for one. And then his man, Trey Murphy, he didn't have a very efficient scoring night either. He only had 14 points on 14 shots. So, it was kind of a stalemate there, and I'll take it, especially if the Toronto Raptors were able to win. Next up, we'll go to Davion Mitchell. Davion Mitchell had 7 points on 3 of 8 shooting. He was 1 of 4 from 3, 4 assists, 1 steal, 3 turnovers. So offensively, not as good as he has been over the past couple of games. Defensively, you pretty much know what you're going to get. He is a very, very good defender, and he is one of the main reasons that the Toronto Raptors are looking so competent defensively. He's able to pick guys up at the point of attack. He's able to put pressure on teams to get into their sets. He's really good at drawing turnovers on screens. He had a really good flop where Zion Williamson just kind of invaded his space with the ball and Davion Mitchell just shamelessly flopped and created a turnover. He's very good at that kind of stuff. It doesn't get counted as steals, but he's creating the turnover. If those were counted as steals, he'd probably get a couple of games. So I'm just impressed by his defense every time I watch. He's always connected to the player he's supposed to be, and then he's helping out defensively. Next up, we're going to Grady Dick. He had an okay offensive night, 10 points on 8 shots. Again, 1 of 4 from 3, still not very efficient from 3. He's 3 of 3 from the free throw line with 6 rebounds, 0 assists, 0 steals, 0 blocks, 0 turnovers, and 5 personal fouls. The fouls have started to become a bit of an issue because he's really, really struggling with screens. For whatever reason, maybe it's fatigue or something like that, or maybe the scouting report has made it more difficult for him. Even though the team is allowing him to go under the screen nowadays, it seems like he's having more trouble than ever with screens, and the screens have been rubbing him out of plays, just like completely erasing him from the play, and then it's a 2-on-1. And Jakob Poeltl, to his credit, is doing a good job of splitting the difference between the ball handler and the screener, but there's only really so much you can do, especially when you have to bring another defender into pick and roll coverage. That creates a man advantage for the opposing team, and that just is going to make your defense struggle. And the Raptors have been giving him quick hooks. He only played 19 minutes in this game, even though he started. So, yeah, his defense has become a big issue. And one of the reasons that I think they've done a lot better recently in terms of defense has been limiting Grady Dick's minutes, especially when other teams are targeting him. Off of the bench, we'll go straight to Chris Boucher. Chris Boucher had another great night, 14 points on 10 shots. He was 4 of 9 from 3, so his 3-point shot was going again. 4 rebounds, 1 steal, 0 turnovers. Yep, guy is looking very good. And I mentioned this, this guy has got to have some suitors. Like, if you're watching him play, he has instant offense off of the bench. He gives a jolt to the team when his shot is on. When other teams, they have to respect his shot, and it's so high it's difficult to block, and he will shoot it. The guy has no qualms about shooting shots. He took 10 shots, 9 of them were threes, and he hit 4 of 9, which is great. So, yeah, you gotta love what he's been able to do, and he is, there's gotta be a team that's looking at what this guy is doing and saying, yeah, we could use that. So, he should be able to return something of value. And you know my thoughts. If you watched last video, you'll know that I think that the Toronto Raptors should be going in a certain direction. And this guy is making it hard to go in that direction. If he returns something of value, he's going to be a legend. He's definitely been one of my favorite players over the past 5 years. He's definitely been the Toronto Raptors' best bench player over that time period. I'm going to kind of miss what he brings to the table. I think he's just a really entertaining player to watch, and I like his personality too. Bruce Brown, very similar kind of thing. He played 29 minutes in this game, so he's really gotten into the good graces of Darko Rajakovic, and it's easy to see why. He's bringing it on both sides of the ball. Even his floater is looking pretty good these days. 12 points on 4 of 8 shooting. He didn't attempt any threes, which, that's fine. He's been hitting his shots for the most part since he's been back, so I'm okay with that. He was 4 of 4 from the free throw line, 9 rebounds. He's a big reason. The Raptors have been doing a good job rebounding from the guard position between him and RJ Barrett. They have been getting a lot of rebounds, and he's a big reason why they have been able to contain other teams on the boards. 9 rebounds is big for a guy who's like 6'6". 2 assists, 3 steals. That's great. 0 blocks, 2 turnovers. Very solid performance. What can you say? He has really flipped the script and looked a lot better after a pretty miserable start to him coming back from knee surgery. So, it's hard to ask for better from Bruce Brown. He's really seemed to buy into what Darko is doing. He moves off of the ball very well, able to get to gaps in the defense. He plays very well off of Jakob Poeltl. Jakob Poeltl has just been doing a very good job of helping to run the offense. And when you have great passers like Jakob Poeltl, Scotty Barnes, RJ Barrett, having a guy who can cut off of the ball and find open spaces is a huge boon to your offense. So great job from him. Orlando Robinson, tough game for him, especially with the fouls. I think that his defense is looking pretty good. I thought he was doing a good job with Zion Williamson and kind of plugging up the gaps in the defense when he was running to the basket, doing a good job getting in between him and the basket. Unfortunately, the fouls were against him. Some of them were legit. Some of them were like he was holding Zion. Some of them were, he left his feet trying to challenge a shot. But I think a couple of the fouls were just Zion Williams is a superstar. Orlando Robinson is the Raptors' third string center. And a lot of the times, Zion is just going to get some calls on him. So he picked up a ton of fouls after I complimented his defense. But, he is a big body and he can stand in the paint and make it hard to shoot over him. Nice long wingspan as well. He can make it tough. Ochai Agbaji returned. He only played 12 minutes. He had 2 points, looked good on the fast break. And, he's returning from injury, so they're going to bring him along slowly. His minutes are kind of reduced because Bruce Brown plays a similar role as him. I think his minutes will be bumped back up after Bruce Brown is, moved, potentially. Who knows? But yeah, a couple of other players played too. The Pelicans have looked out of sorts. I think that a lot of this is collective psychic damage from being so injured. I think that they're built wrong. They really need a center. And if you look at Jakob Poeltl's performance, it's indicative of what a center means to a basketball club. If you have a guy like Jakob Poeltl who can finish plays in the paint, you're not forced to play gimmick defenses. The Raptors kind of figured out the zone defense of the Pelicans. I mean, the Pelicans don't really have a big like Jakob Poeltl. Yves Missy can do some stuff, and he's an impressive rookie, but he is a rookie. He's a rookie. He didn't score any points this game. He played 22 minutes, no points. You're asking too much of him. You want to be able to bring this guy along. You can't just throw him to the Wolves and have him go up against a 7-footer who knows what he's doing. It's just not going to work out very well for you. And Jakob Poeltl just feasted on them. So they're kind of built wrong. And then they have 2 guys that I just am not big fans of. DeJounte Murray, CJ McCollum. They are not difference makers, and if they're a difference maker, they're kind of difference makers in the wrong direction. So you have Zion Williamson with an all-timer performance. He had 31 points on 18 shots. He only missed 5 shots the entire evening. And then when he's on this kind of tear, CJ McCollum and DeJounte Murray started taking possessions away from him and trying to cook themselves, and it was just like, what are you doing? How can they not find this guy who is having an insane performance, who could have probably gone for 40? He was just so efficient. Then you have these other 2 guys that are I just don't think play the right way. And kudos to the Raptors. They did a good job, especially off of the bench. They outdueled the Pelicans bench. The bench for the Pelicans is pretty thin. They're missing a lot of their firepower, especially Brandon Ingram, who has cooked the Raptors in the past. He's out. When you're losing that kind of firepower, you're going to struggle to score. And the Toronto Raptors had a bunch of really good performances from their role players, and then good enough performances from their star players that they were able to just outduel the Pelicans. And next up, the Toronto Raptors. The schedule remains easy for the Toronto Raptors. They play the Wizards in Washington tomorrow at 7 o'clock, and then they play the Chicago Bulls. I'm just going to say right now, if the team remains the same tomorrow, if they don't trade anybody, the Toronto Raptors, I think, are just going to beat the Wizards. The Wizards are a young team that doesn't quite know how to win yet, and the Raptors have a bunch of savvy veterans that are playing the right way, and their defense looks good. I think that they'll just probably defeat the Washington Wizards and continue their winning streak. So, yeah, if they are looking to tank, it's not looking so hot right now. Anyway, that is the episode. What do you guys think about the Toronto Raptors defense? Are they simply just taking advantage of a cream puff schedule, or is this legit? Let me know what you think in the comment section, and also on Twitter and Blue Sky, where you can reach me at Raps Report. I love talking to Raptors fans, love answering your questions, responding to your comments. It's very fun. Love to get the pulse of Raptor Nation. And if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe. It helps the channel grow and reach other Raptors fans like you. And as always, thank you for tuning in to Raptors Report, your source for in-depth Raptors content.